Subnautica 2 is apparently due soon, and is embroiled in a large-scale scandal that leaves a lot of questions as to the eventual quality of the project. Subnautica itself was a game I didn't play until well after it was complete. To put some perspective in it, it was nascent in early access in 2014, and I didn't even buy it until 2023. But it's been a very high-profile game, so it's kind of crazy that when I first bought it, I still didn't actually know anything about it, just that it was a popular game, involved a lot of swimming, and Retro Raven were selling it. When I finally booted it up and decided to dive in, I basically dived right back out. And not for the reasons you think. Subnautica, as it turns out, is an exploration-based survival crafting game, and two of those three words are basically like poison to me. If you didn't hear me say so on this nifty little video about Resident Evil 4, I don't do crafting at all if I can help it. Survival games are really not my genre, and I avoid crafting wherever it bleeds into the rest of the gaming environment, which is unfortunately a lot of places. I'm the kind of person that misses when you could boot up Ocarina of Time, scrounge up 80 rupees by cutting grass, and then go buy a prominent shield you'd use for literally the rest of the game. I don't like crafting, and as soon as I realized Subnautica was basically all about just that, I felt my interest retreating like the tide. It didn't help that Subnautica, in a trend popularized by many lesser games arrogantly jettisoned onto the market, gives you basically no direction from the jump. What's going on? Why did the ship crash? Who am I? Why am I here? What am I collecting all this crap for? None of this is answered for a long ways into the game, well past the point that anyone who could conceivably be interested in it could reliably be reeled in with the promise of those answers. Fun fact, since I had so little direction and so little interest in what I was doing on my first play, one of the first things I did was swim directly to the Aurora. I'm talking no sea glide, no extra oxygen tank, nothing, just because I figured that was obviously what you were supposed to do if you wanted info on what was going on. By the time I actually got there, with the water ridiculously murky, I ran into a Reaper. Except I didn't know it was a Reaper because I hadn't had any online exposure to them, and because Subnautica has that depth perception issue that makes everything look way smaller than it actually is, I didn't see some giant behemoth leviathan monstrosity ready to annihilate my existence. It didn't even grab me, it just nicked me on my way past. But it was still enough to get me to quit the game right then and there, because I was like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm frustrated and not really having fun, and a really big fish with a skull for a face just swam by me. I'm out. Then comes the end of 2025 and 2026, when I started hearing about Subnautica 2, and decided to give the first game a try again. And this time I stuck it out, and ended up liking it a lot, despite myself. Don't get me wrong, Subnautica as a whole game is very much still the exception rather than the rule. It has a lot of elements that I just don't like that largely boil down to its genre and structure, but I decided to stream it for a friend, who's really into it, and she was able to give me advice and help me out, and I slowly started liking the game as I made more progress. The sense of progress really is a thing that kept me playing, and I do understand that that's the hook of games like these, where you build your way up through the game from scratch. Once I was able to make my first sea moth, I was thrilled. I could go a lot of different places without having to constantly surface for oxygen, and I didn't have to feel naked and exposed while exploring now. What really did it for me though was the scanning. I am a huge OG fan of Metroid Prime, and I love the scanning mechanic in that game. I fucking love it. I love pressing a button and getting a shit ton of dedicated info about something in the game environment, and I love that this approach is taken for both enemies and the local geology and wildlife. Whenever a game involves any kind of scanning mechanic, I eat that shit up. Like, I'll play Paper Mario 2 and press Goombella's little X to tattle ability for every single room, person, and enemy in the game. I love it. Of course, it was still a really slow process, and a major part of it being so slow is that yes, I do have thalassophobia. Not cute thalassophobia either, where you like scream like a little girl every time you encounter a mean looking sea creature, which is not to say that sea creatures don't scare me. I still refuse to go within a 10-mile radius of anything remotely resembling a Reaper. They're terrifying. But that's not where my phobia kicks in. In those areas where you're exploring the vast emptiness of the ocean, where there's no visible landmarks and no visible seafloor beneath you, that's what gets my hands shaking and makes me want to vomit. So certain parts of this game were a rough ride. Speaking of rough rides, when I finally got to the aforementioned sea moth, my friend suggested I go to the Aurora, since eventually I was going to have to fix the drive core and also get the things necessary to finish the game, and her advice basically went something like, oh yeah, just go around to the back of the ship, there should be an entrance there. And to be fair, she hadn't played in a long while and could legitimately have just forgotten where the entrance was, but a part of me still wonders if she was trying to punk me. Because yes, I did get very scared when the water got very murky and everything started shaking, and yes, I was very unsettled when I started hearing awful roars in the water. And yes, I did get my shit clocked by a Reaper, and yes, it did traumatize me. Way more violent and scary than the first time. Bye bye, Sea Moth number 1. She was also present when the sunbeam started contacting my life pod, and thus the actual plot of the game began. That was a hell of an experience, because I really watched that fuck-ass tower blow up my ride and everyone in it. Don't get me wrong, I didn't think I was actually going to be rescued because I knew I wasn't going to complete the objective of the game, that is to say, leave the planet, without ever understanding what was interesting about it in the first place. But I did think I might actually get to meet some other people, some other characters who might, I don't know, get stranded here with me, or at least give me some direction before they got punked. But then I started understanding the bacterial infection and why the Aurora got shot down, and then some crazy specter started haunting me and sending me telepathic messages. It was also around this time that I finally started doing some proper base building, which is something that can very easily get distracting. Bases are great because they're a form of safety that can be miles away from the life pod, where you're in complete control. Granted, even base building can be tedious and time-consuming because you can't just build a base. You have to build a base, then add a door so you can actually get inside it, then reinforce it so it doesn't collapse on itself, then find some way to keep the power on so you can actually breathe in there. It's a little ridiculous. This is also why I started my practice of building enormous, fuck-off solar panel towers that would often stretch from the surface to hundreds of meters down where I actually needed the base to be. Yeah, I could use a bioreactor, and nuclear reactors are really good if you want to put in the effort, but both of those need to be kept stocked if you want them to stay functioning, and I simply was not having that life. I am a person who likes finality and a real, terminable sense of progress, and one should never underestimate the crazy amount of work I will put in right now to avoid having to continually do work later. But like I said, it's fun and something you can easily get sidetracked doing. Putting a bunch of windows in so you can see the outside view and getting an aquarium to fill with sea creatures is practically a necessity. The exploratory sense of discovery and the intimidating yet alluring factor of going further and deeper into 4546B's oceans does work wonders for the charms of the game, and again I would compare it to Metroid, just entirely underwater. In fact, if you remove the game from its crafting elements, you'd have something very close to the ideal Metroid game, as there are no characters around to chat to you or ruin the mood, the music is atmospheric yet kick-ass, the local flora and fauna change depending on where you are, and you're constantly getting stronger as you explore. So in that respect, it's very much my type of game. I say stronger, there's not really any combat of any sort, which is one of the things I would ding the game on. There are defense shields and zappers you can apply to your vehicles, and a paralyzing rifle that'll stun enemies for a few seconds, but these simply don't cut it for me when it comes to going anywhere really dangerous. I know the creators of Subnautica had their reasons for not letting you rampage through the planet's oceans, and from an environmentalist standpoint and a nature lover standpoint, I do agree. But it must be said, you can't stock the game with dozens of roid-raging Moby Dicks, and then not give me a practical means of killing them. But despite how helpless and vulnerable I feel playing this game, I do love that it goes out of its way to be scary. It is indeed a brilliant game when it comes to being unnerving, perhaps a little too good at stoking that thalassophobia of mine. Anytime the water around me changes color, I get very nervous, even if I know nothing is wrong. You boot up the game, and you travel 10 feet, and all of a sudden everything is dark green and you're lost in the forest of kelp. Stalkers and bone sharks, both pretty common enemies in their own right, utter horrifying screams in the distance for basically no reason except to keep you on your toes. And don't even get me started on the leviathans, not to mention the warpers. Braving that terror though is the only way to beat the game, as the only way to cure the infection that's got you quarantined on the planet is to go to the game's very deepest, darkest reaches. A few power-saving modules and depth upgrades will get you there, and if you can board the Aurora long enough to get the Neptune rocket blueprints, you're done and done. I do wish that Subnautica resembled a more finished product for how good it is, admittedly. This game having a Switch release when it still bugs and glitches as badly as it does is crazy, and a lot of the bugginess of the game, which can easily result in you being trapped in the world geometry, isn't really excusable for a game that's been out this long and is about to get a sequel. A AAA game wouldn't pass muster with this kind of quality, and we rightfully wouldn't let them. But overall, I had a great time. The reveal of a massive leviathan creature actually being the most intelligent life form on the planet, and helping you cure the infection if you can hatch your eggs safely, is super interesting and compelling. And I love that the final message the game leaves you with is that life is precious and valuable at every size and that you can connect with the world around you. I haven't played Below Zero yet, but I'm excited to do so. In the meantime, I'm going to be going absolutely stupid getting this huge jelly shroom base made, and I hope I get to show it to you soon. Thanks for watching!